You wake up with a sore throat. You reach for a pill, swallow it with water, and go back to bed assuming science will handle the rest. It is such a small, automatic motion that you never stop to ask where it came from. But for almost the entire span of human existence, getting sick did not work like this at all. There was no pill. There was no doctor. There was no germ theory to even explain what was happening inside you. And yet, humans survived. Not occasionally. Not by luck. They survived sickness for hundreds of thousands of years using methods that were, in their own strange way, remarkably sophisticated. Here is the real answer. Ancient humans did not fight illness with medicine the way you think of medicine. They fought it with behavior. Anthropologists call this behavioral immunity, and it is one of the most overlooked survival systems in human history. Before antibiotics, before vaccines, before any understanding of bacteria or viruses, your ancestors were already running a functioning healthcare system. It just did not look like a hospital. It looked like instinct. Start with something almost nobody thinks about. Disgust. Disgust feels like a simple emotion. The wrinkled nose, the recoil, the gag. Psychologist Valerie Curtis at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has spent years studying why disgust exists at all, and her research points to something striking. Disgust is not random. It targets almost exclusively the things most likely to carry disease. Rotting meat, bodily fluids, open wounds, insects swarming on food. Across every culture ever studied, the list of disgusting things is nearly identical, which makes no sense if disgust is just a cultural preference. It only makes sense if disgust is a survival tool. Your ancestors who felt a strong revulsion towards spoiled food and infected wounds were less likely to eat the spoiled food or touch the infected wound. They lived longer, they had more children, and slowly, over thousands of generations, disgust became wired into the species as a kind of pre-medical immune system operating entirely through emotion rather than knowledge. This means something deeply strange. The queasy feeling you get looking at a moldy sandwich is not a modern overreaction. It is hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors who survived because that exact feeling kept them away from danger. But disgust alone could not stop everything. Disease still spread, and ancient humans developed a second behavioral defense that researchers now call self-isolation behavior. Long before anyone understood contagion, sick individuals in many traditional societies were instinctively avoided, and they often instinctively withdrew. Anthropologist Dan Fessler, who studies the evolutionary psychology of disease avoidance at UCLA, has documented how illness changes behavior on both sides. Healthy people unconsciously pull away from those showing visible signs of sickness, and sick people, even without understanding why, often isolate themselves, becoming less social, less active, more withdrawn. This is sometimes called sickness behavior, and it shows up not just in humans but across mammals broadly. It looks like weakness. It is actually strategy. An animal that stops moving, stops eating normally, and pulls back from the group is unconsciously reducing how much it spreads disease and conserving the energy its immune system needs to fight back. Think about what that means. The exhaustion and social withdrawal you feel when you are sick, the thing that feels like your body failing you, is not failure at all. It is an ancient, coordinated strategy that predates language, predates tools, predates almost everything you'd call human culture. Then there is the question of actual treatment. What did your ancestors do once disgust and isolation weren't enough? Once someone was already sick? The answer is more advanced than most people assume. Archaeologists studying Neanderthal remains at the Shanidar cave site in Iraq found pollen evidence suggesting some burials included specific plants, several of which have documented medicinal properties, including yarrow and centauri, plants still used in some herbal medicine traditions today. Whether or not every detail of that interpretation holds up, what's clear from broader archaeological and ethnobotanical research is that humans across far-flung, unconnected regions independently discovered real pharmacological knowledge. Willow bark, which contains a compound chemically related to aspirin, was used for pain across multiple ancient cultures, including ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, thousands of years before anyone understood what salicylic acid actually was. They didn't know the chemistry. They knew the result. Chew this bark. The fever drops. Generation after generation passed that knowledge down, refining it through trial and observation long before it had a scientific name. Ethnobotanist and researcher Mark Plotkin, who has spent decades documenting plant medicine knowledge among indigenous communities, particularly in the Amazon, has argued that traditional healers often possess an extraordinarily precise, tested pharmacological knowledge base built through countless generations of careful observation rather than formal experimentation. Entire pharmaceutical compounds used today, including treatments derived from foxglove and certain anti-malarial drugs, trace their origins directly back to plants first identified through this kind of ancestral trial and observation. The lab work came later. The discovery came first, from people with no microscopes, no chemistry, and no germ theory at all. There's something almost humbling in that. Modern medicine likes to imagine itself as starting from zero and building upward through pure reason, but a huge amount of it was actually built on top of an already existing body of knowledge, accumulated slowly by people who were paying extremely close attention to their environment and to each other. And it wasn't only plants. Wound care shows a similar pattern. Researchers studying ancient surgical practices have found evidence of trepanation, a procedure involving deliberately creating an opening in the skull dating back over 7,000 years, with some skulls showing clear signs of healing afterward. That means people survived it, repeatedly, across different regions, completely independently of each other. Whatever theory ancient practitioners held about why this worked, whether releasing spirits or relieving pressure from head trauma, the actual outcome, in many documented cases, was survival. Trial and observation, refined slowly over centuries, sometimes produced techniques that worked for reasons people couldn't yet explain. So why does this matter to you? Scrolling through symptoms on your phone at 2 in the morning? Because the instinct underneath your modern healthcare system is older than the system itself. When you feel a sudden wave of disgust at spoiled food, that's not a quirky personal reaction. That's deep evolutionary architecture protecting you exactly the way it protected someone 40,000 years ago. When you feel the pull to withdraw and rest the moment you get sick, that's not laziness. That's the same sickness behavior researchers have documented across mammals, optimizing your body's chances of recovery. And when you reach for a treatment that actually works, you are standing at the very end of an unbroken chain of human observation that stretches back further than written language itself. Modern medicine did not replace this ancient system. It built directly on top of it, using tools your ancestors never had access to, but following instincts and methods they discovered the hard way, through trial, loss, and an extraordinary amount of careful attention. You woke up this morning with a sore throat and reached for a pill, assuming science had finally solved what your ancestors never could. But your ancestors had already solved more of it than you think. The pill in your hand is not the beginning of the story. It is simply the latest chapter in something that started in disgust, in isolation, in bark and root and bone, long before anyone called it medicine at all.